Hi lovely people, welcome back to my channel. If you are new to my channel, my name is Zeni. Do not forget to subscribe and do not forget to always come back to watch. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for always coming back. I really appreciate your support for me. Domestic violence is like a disease which has eaten deep into our society. One cannot talk enough about domestic violence. The rate at which domestic violence is increasing now is becoming very frightening and alarming. The more awareness is being created about domestic violence, the more it is growing. Do not get me wrong, domestic violence is everywhere in the whole world. But there are societies and systems that encourages domestic violence more. In such societies, the victim is rendered powerless and hopeless, giving their abusers the power to abuse them the more. For example, in a society like Nigeria, a woman who has an abusive husband and runs away from the relationship is branded a failure and asked to go back to go and make her marriage or her relationship work. And a man who is a domestic violence victim dares not to speak it out, otherwise he is branded a weakling. In most cases, not only the victims need help, most of the time the abusers also need help because it is a mental illness which needs to be treated psychologically.
My sister met her boyfriend when she was 17. She fell head over heels in love with him, and to be honest, my whole family adored him. He treated her like a princess, and for the first year of their time together, she was floating on cloud nine. We were all so happy for her, and none of us could believe that her first love was such a nice guy. Around her 18th birthday, though, the cracks started to appear. Sometimes I'd noticed that she'd have marks across her body, but whenever I questioned her about it, she'd say that it either happened on a night out in fights or that the cat did it. I wasn't sure if I believed her silly excuses, but I'm not going to lie, even I doubted myself because he seemed like such a nice guy. One day, she turns up to my house with a black eye. So this time, I press the issue. I get her to tell me the truth. She says that her boyfriend lashes out at her when they get into fights. I tell her that she has to leave him, that men like that are dangerous, they never change, they only get worse. She says that there's absolutely no way that she plans on leaving him. She loves him too much, and it's at this point she decides to tell me that she's pregnant with his baby and there's no way that she'll raise a child alone as a single parent. We grew up with just our mum, so when she said this, I was devastated because I knew in that moment there was nothing I could do to get her away from him. I knew that having a complete family meant everything to my sister. A few months down the line, she calls me in hysterics. She says that she's in the hospital and she's losing the baby and she wants me to go down there to support her. Obviously, I dropped everything I'm doing and I rushed to her. My heart was racing. I finally get to the hospital and she's covered in blood, deep gashes all over her body. It didn't take a genius to figure out what had happened. Her boyfriend had attacked her so badly that she'd obviously lost the baby as well. Mind you, she's 5 months pregnant at this point. Could you imagine what that's like, losing a baby that far into your pregnancy? I begged her to leave him, but she didn't. She even lied to the police about his whereabouts, and she said that she wouldn't give evidence against him in court anyway. She went on to miscarry 2 more pregnancies back to back within months of each other because of his violence towards her. After the 3rd miscarriage, she said she'd had enough and that she was ready to leave him. We were so happy that he'd finally be out of her life. But before we knew it, she told us she was going back to him. He promised to change and that she couldn't bear to be without him. And it didn't take long before the cycle of abuse started again. You know what I mean. When he's really loving to begin with, he does everything for you and nothing is too much. They literally worship the ground you walk on. But before you know it, they start arguing and my sister starts isolating herself from my family. I can only assume that the times she would refuse to see us was the times where she had obvious marks on her body from his beatings. She was 20 years old when she tells us that she's pregnant again. Sounds bad, but we were devastated. We knew that this pregnancy would end in one of 2 ways. Another miscarriage, or she would end up having a baby with this monster and being tied to him for the rest of her life. But I knew it was important that she needed someone there to support her, and I wanted to stay as close to her as possible just in case anything happened. She went on to carry this pregnancy full term, and she gave birth to my beautiful niece. And she swears at this time things have calmed down and he's a changed man. He's managed to fool my sister once again, because it's not long before the abuse starts up. We begged and begged and begged her to leave him. We even threatened her with social services if she didn't leave. But she completely cut us all out and isolated herself from my whole family because she said that she just didn't want to hear what we had to say. She loved him too much and that all we were doing was causing extra hassle for her. Me and my mum lived in fear every day. Back then we didn't have social media, so I couldn't even stalk her on her socials to see what she was doing. It was exactly 1 year and 9 months where we didn't hear anything. And then one day, our worst nightmare came to life. We get a phone call from the police to tell us that my sister is in a coma. I think the day I saw my sister in hospital was the lowest moment of my life. I didn't recognise her from all the injuries she was covered in. The doctor tells us that her brain was so badly damaged because he'd caved her skull in. Her spine was broken in two, causing permanent nerve damage, and her lungs were punctured. So even if by some miracle she would have woken up from her coma, she would have been severely disabled for life. The only thing that was really keeping her alive at this point was the ventilation machine that she was on. I don't really want to go into the details of this bit too much, but a few days later we said our goodbyes and my sister died in my mum's arms. When the police had called us initially, we asked what had happened to my niece. Was she present at the time? Where was she now? But she'd been taken into foster care when the police arrived at the house. Me and my mum worked so hard with social workers in the courts to make sure that my niece could come and live with me. My mum was going through chemotherapy at the time, so we decided that it would be best that I was the one to look after her. Between my mum's cancer treatment, a court case for my sister's murder, and yes, I will always call it a murder, and fighting for custody for my niece, it took over my life. But it was all worth it. I got custody of my niece and she came to live with me. I would jump through every hoop over and over again for her. As for my sister's boyfriend, he was convicted of manslaughter and got the maximum sentence of 8 years. 8 years, you know, that's it. 8 years for murdering my sister. And I don't care what spin the courts tried to put on it. What he did was murder, not manslaughter. When he came out of prison, he wanted to have access to my niece. So again, I fought tooth and nail through the courts to make sure that he's never allowed to be near her. I won. He's not allowed to have any contact with her whatsoever. My niece is 16 now, and she knows the full truth of what happened between her mum and her dad. And she says that even if she was allowed to see him, she'd choose not to anyway. I miss my sister every day. My heart still aches even 14 years on. But we keep my sister's memory alive. We talk about her all the time, and I've made sure that my niece has grown up knowing everything about her mum. I also try my best to educate her in dating, red flags, abuse and violence. I've now got a career where I help women who are survivors of domestic abuse. I refuse to let my sister's death be in vain. The reason why I'm asking you to tell this story is because sometimes even the smartest women end up dating and falling in love with abusers who are just as clever and manipulative. And if just 10 people watch this and it saves one life, then that's one family that doesn't have to deal with the heartache of losing someone they love like we did. So please, ladies, don't ignore red flags. It doesn't matter whether they appear at the beginning of dating someone or deep into a relationship. Please get help and get out. Please don't end up like my sister.